Welcome everyone to my first and probably last horror game review. To be honest, all horror games I've played were of the FNAF franchise, so this was my first time venturing outside of it into other horror games. When I saw it on the eShop for cheap, I was like, I heard it's a lighter horror game and it's really cheap, so why not? The gameplay largely involves you walking around an 1800s mansion, solving a puzzle every now and then. There's no story segment in this review, just because it can be summarized in a few sentences. You're a mentally deranged painter roaming around in a Victorian mansion, trying to keep your sanity and piecing together who you are and what you've done, whilst attempting to finish your final painting and getting it right finally. Layers of Fear Legacy also includes an expansion called Inheritance, in which you return to the mansion as the painter's daughter and go through flashbacks to discover what he was like as a father. So, now that I've explained the story, let's cut back to the gameplay. As I've said, you largely just walk around but solve a puzzle sometimes. Some things for the puzzles were just too well hidden for me, so I had to consult a walkthrough at least a dozen times because they were very well hidden. You find items sometimes that are somehow connected to the painter, and he explains what he's done with it, but I didn't find enough to be able to piece his story back together. Also, since this is a horror game, I have to talk about the scares. The game utilizes this mechanic where you face a direction, then you come across a locked door, for example, turn around, and the environment is entirely different from where you've been before. It uses this mechanic really well, and despite how large of a part it plays during the whole experience, it never really gets old. Also, there are a couple of really good scares. There aren't many jump scares. You've kept uneasy because of the changing environment and the sound design. As you'd expect, the further you go, the more insane things get. This game isn't really about scaring you per se, just making you feel uneasy and fear what might be there after you open the next door. And this, in the graphics section, is where I get a bit more technical. I played Layers of Fear Legacy on a Nintendo Switch OLED model, so obviously the graphics are gonna be much worse than on Xbox/PlayStation/PC. For one, there's some anti-aliasing, but where there isn't, you can really see it. As I watched a walkthrough, whenever I got stuck on a puzzle, I noticed that the other versions are much darker than the Switch port. So if you fear the dark and not being able to see much, I'd say get the Switch port, it's much brighter. Performance was a very mixed bag. In docked mode it ran with around 15 to 30 FPS. I had enough of the slowness one time, so I played the majority of the game in handheld mode, where the performance was actually better at around 20 to 60 FPS. I know that's a huge range, but that's how it was. I didn't know handheld mode could run better in any game, but here we are. But no matter what mode I played on, the controls were still janky. It's not bad or game breaking at all, it's just not as fluid as you'd think. Also, the game will recommend you every time you boot it up to try out motion controls to open drawers and doors. I tried it and I can confidently say you should not. It's like a V motion controls. When it works, it really works. When it doesn't work, it really doesn't work. It's okay as a gimmick, you can try it once or twice, but it's much easier to play with them off. Also, I discovered after finishing the game that there's a fast walk button. Hold L if you want to run. The game never explains this. So, in conclusion, Layers of Fear Legacy, in my experience, is a pretty good horror game. If you played this on anything else, it would be multiple times scarier. So, if you want something that isn't that scary, only unsettling, and you don't mind the performance, this is for you. I beat the game with the expansion in about 6 hours, without knowing that you can run, so it's not a long game at all. Layers of Fear Legacy costs €20, which I feel is a bit too much, but I bought it on sale at €4, which is very much worth it in my opinion. The game gets an 80 out of 100 from me. Thanks for listening, drop a like and a sub if you enjoyed, and see you in the next one.